All right, everybody, we finally made it. This is the very last PowerPoint that you're going to have for Year 12 biology. What we're going to be looking at is human evolution. A nice way to finish the year, if you ask me. So the key knowledge that we're going to be covering within this topic is the difference between primates, hominoids, and hominins. We're also going to be looking at evolution and different forms of evolution that we can be tracking. We're going to be looking at the Australopithecus, we're going to be looking at the genus Homo as a whole, and we're going to be diving a little bit deeper into Homo sapiens, Homo neanderthalis, Denisovans, those types of things. And we're also going to be looking at cognitive changes, so thinking processes, and how that's evolved over time with different versions of humans, and how that's caused cultural evolution. So we're going to be looking at a few very interesting topics. We're going to look at the human fossil record and how, as we gather evidence over time, our beliefs and understandings change. So in particular, we're going to look at Denisovans and some more recent evidence and information that's been found about them and how it's kind of changed the way that we're thinking about our evolution. So what we're going to start off with is, what actually are we? What are humans? So you need to know that we are of the genus Homo and the species Sapien, which is down the bottom here. So we are Homo sapiens, that's how we get our name. But we are also mammalia, we are mammals, we have hair, mammary glands, we have molars and incisors, so we have different types of teeth. We have a single bone that makes up our jaw, and there are 3 bones in our middle ear that help us hear. We are also a part of the classification of primates, so we are primates. We have 5 fingers, we have an opposable thumb, so we can give people the thumbs up to say all's good, but we also have fingernails instead of having claws. So we are also primates. So a few things to note here. We are, as I just said, primates. It's that flat nails. We have the flat nails instead of claws. We have a relatively large brain compared to our body size and our head size, those types of things. We have sensitive finger pads, so we can feel things on our fingers, and we have binocular vision, so we have 2 eyeballs. We are also mammals because we are warm-blooded. We are vertebrates. We have sweat glands. We produce milk. We have hair. We have bones in the middle of our ear, and we have different sections of our brain that do lots of different things. So that's what makes us mammals. We are also hominoids. So this is a classification of modern and extinct great apes. So all forms of human life over the expanse of humanity and beyond us. So this includes modern humans, so us, chimpanzees, gorillas, orangutans, and any immediate ancestor of those animals as well. So we are hominoids. We are also hominins, and this is a more recent group of humans. So this is humans, the extinct human species, so Australopithecus, Neanderthalis, all that type of stuff, and our immediate ancestors, and we're looking at anything really within the genus Homo. So the Homo, we are Homo sapiens, Homo australopithecus, and all those types of things as well, also sit within the hominid distinction there. So if we look at our little tree here, we've got primates at the top, and as we said before, we are primates, and we sit down this right hand side here, arthropod, and then you get hominoids, and then it goes down to read the hominoid chart over here, and you'll find us on the very right hand side. So if we dive into this classification with a bit more thought, I suppose you could say, behind it, human evolution and the evidence that we have for human evolution is constantly changing. So what happened is they found some DNA evidence and it forced people that were researching into former humans and human evolution to add in tribes. So it sits between family and genus, and that is what separates us humans from the apes. So humans are hominins, along with all those other extinct species that sit within the genus Homo, and we spoke about that before, but the big distinction there, particularly between the humans and the apes, so the hominins and the non-hominins, is this ability to walk upright, which we'll talk about in a bit more detail later on, but it's this ability to walk upright rather than having to climb from tree to tree. We are mammals, as we spoke about before, so we have this hair that covers our body, where if you think about whales and dolphins, they don't really have very much hair, if any really, on their bodies. They might have a few little bristly bits around here that help them trap their food. We produce milk to feed our young. We have different types of teeth that do different jobs. We have a lower jaw here that's made up of one single bone that goes all the way around here, where other animals might have different parts to their jaw that they can separate to enable them to eat their prey. And we also have 3 bones in our ear that help us to hear a lot clearer as well. Now, there are 4,000 other species that sit with us in this classification of mammalia, or being a mammal. So you need to keep in mind that there are a lot of common characteristics that we just listed between us and other mammals, but that doesn't make us all exactly the same. You know, we're not lions, thankfully. So we sit within the subcategory of mammals in terms of being a primate. Now, Ida is a very interesting little lemur-like creature. They were found 47 million, well, they lived 47 million years ago, apologies, in an area that would now be referred to as Germany. They were found in 2009, and they are considered to be the ancestor to all mammals, all human life. They are a very small mammal, teeny tiny. They have the flat nails like we have instead of claws, and they also have hands like us with the opposable thumb so that they can grab a hold of things. So it's a very important distinction for primates that they can hold on to things and that they have these flat nails instead of having claws. And Ida is evidence of this existing 47 million years ago. It's a very long time ago. We are hominids, as we said before. Sorry, hominoids. I'll get the pronunciation correct. And what this distinction means in terms of breaking away from primates is that we do not have a tail. We have remnants of a tailbone, so you might have heard of people talking about hurting their tailbone and all that kind of stuff, but we don't actually have a tail. We have molars that have 5 different cusps on them, so 5 different peaks, where monkeys, so those primates, only have 4. Our rib cage is very flattened, where their rib cage tends to stick out and create this like curve shape towards it that ours doesn't. And we have options in terms of travel. So hominoids could swing from tree to tree, but they could also use their knuckles to help them walk, or they could walk on 2 legs, which we refer to as bipedalism. If they're walking on 4, so their arms and their legs, then we call them quadriplegical. So that's quad for 4, bi for 2. And the posture of hominoids tends to be more erect, so more straight up. It frees up the hands for being able to hold and manipulate food, carrying babies, using tools to do jobs and all that kind of stuff. So hominoids and the ability of our hands is really something that's quite important and very unique to hominoids. So we talked about us being primates before, and humans are primates. The big thing here is that we are dexterous with our hands and our feet, so we can do things with our hands and our feet. And I don't know about you, but my feet aren't as dexterous as my hands. But you know, some people are a lot more dexterous than others when it comes to their feet. They might be able to pick things up off their floor and those types of things as well. This is where we also get that distinction with the flat nails, that our digits are sensitive to touch, so you can feel things. We have 3D color vision. We only have a small number of offspring, particularly when you compare us to other animals. So multiple births, so twins and triplets and quads and all that type of stuff are a lot more rare within the primate community than they are within other animals. And part of that is because we do spend time looking after our young. So we put a lot of time and effort into caring for them. And if you had a whole heap of young, you don't really have the time to be able to look after them. It's kind of like hedging your bets. You know, if I have a whole heap of offspring, then it doesn't really matter if 1 or 2 or half of them get eaten, because I got another 50 that can hang around and maybe they'll be able to pass on my genes. Primates have less young and they spend a lot of time raising them and passing on traditions and things like that, and they're hoping to keep them alive. And the gestational period, because of that, is something that's a lot longer, particularly when you compare them to other animals like fish, for example. They produce their eggs and they've got external fertilization and all of that type of stuff. Our skeletons have relative flexibility, so bending down, being able to touch your toes, stretching out far, all that kind of stuff. And as we said before, our brains are relatively large when we compare them to the size of other mammals. So if you compare the size of the human brain to the size of a whale brain and all of that type of stuff, our brains are actually quite big. So let's have a look at some of the different skeletons. And you should be able to see here that the human one on the right, the limbs of the upper body are a lot shorter than those of, say, the gorilla. And that's because the gorillas, chimpanzees, and all these ones to the left have more of an opportunity to use all 4 of their limbs. They still stretch out and reach to travel from tree to tree, where that's something that humans don't really do anymore. So we're more focused on being bipedal, where some of these other primates swap between their forms of transport. So they're not permanently bipedal. They do use some quadriplegical tendencies as well, so walking on all 4. And you can also see the shape of the pelvis that we have here and how that helps us to be predominantly for walking on 2 legs over 4. So their pelvis structure isn't quite as upright as ours, which enables them to be on all 4 limbs more comfortably, I suppose you could say, than what we are. So humans as hominoids, we spoke about this a little bit before. So no tails. Monkeys have tails, so they are not hominoids. We spoke about having the 5 cusps rather than the floor, the flattened rib cage, locomotion being bipedal, and then that posture being fully erect as well. This is just a nice little summary for you to make sure that you've gotten these notes written down. We were speaking about brain size. When we talk about the skull shape, and this is something that we do have samples of at school, so make sure that you're having a look through the box and you're comparing the relative skull shapes of the different versions of humans that we've had over time and chimpanzees and stuff like that. But what we're looking at here is volume of brain space. So we measure the brain cavity, so the capacity for brain space, and we measure it as a volume. So the human is down here, bottom right. And you can see that the relative blue space compared to something like the chimpanzee is quite large. And this graph in the middle puts humans here. So the only one so far with a larger brain is the Neanderthal, which is something that we've evolved from, and Homo erectus. So you can see this trend here is towards a larger brain and a bigger cavity to fit the brain in compared to other structures as well. But there's a range of different features that you should be noticing in these skulls and what's similar and what's different. It's things like the position of the teeth compared to something like the gorilla. So our teeth don't stick out as far. They are quite flat with our face. And you should notice that we've got this bony ridge here for our nose, where all these guys here don't really have it. You start to see it in the Homo habilis and the Homo erectus and the Neanderthalis. But you can also see that the big brow ridge that we have here in the gorilla, sitting right above their eyebrow, really tends to flatten out in the human. So that isn't as prominent either. So there's a range of different features to these skulls that show commonality but change over time as forms of proof of evolution, really. So why are we hominin? We are bipedal, and the position of our foramen magnum, which is the hole that's at the bottom of the skull, and I'm going to show you some pictures in a minute, which is where your spinal cord and your brain cords and everything like that run down your spine, is very centered under our skull compared to other animals, which would have it further towards the back for their quadriplegical rather than bipedalism. We have that larger brain capacity compared to apes, and that's not capacity in terms of what we can do, but it's the actual volume and size of our brain. We have smaller jaws and smaller teeth as well. Our hair has evolved to be quite fine compared to apes and other things like that. We have a curve in our lower spine, which helps us to be able to carry weight. And we have a shorter but wider pelvis as well. That's a part of being bipedal, that we have this pelvis that's not as long as it used to be, but it's a lot shorter and wider. So this is the foramen magnum that I was talking about before. And as you can see, the humans at the bottom compared to the Australopithecus africanus, which comes before us, it's an ancestral version of humans. and then the female gorilla. And you can see that over time going down, that that hole moves closer towards the center of the skull. You can also see the change in that jaw shape becoming significantly shorter but wider, so it's not as long. And the sharp teeth, the canine teeth that you have, your pointy vampire teeth, I suppose you could call them, the ones that really cut into your food, are a lot shorter as well. So there's the changes to that bone structure in your teeth, which also is a form of proof for evolution there as well. So one of the bigger things that we're looking at as a part of evolution and this change over time is hominins, and where hominins have been found. And what this graphic here is trying to represent to us is this idea of where human life could have originated or could have started. And there's a range of different hypotheses around this. And there's evidence to support each one of them, and there's evidence to refute each one of them. So it's important that when you are thinking about evolution, that you keep in mind that there's this range of different theories that people have. What you can see here is the red line is proposing the male movements, where the blue line really is proposing female. In terms of tracking males and where males have lived, they really use the Y chromosome there to look for any changes between former humans that are found in different locations. And for females, they typically tend to use the mitochondrial DNA, which we spoke about in the last PowerPoint, because it doesn't change and it gets passed down through the maternal line. So you can really track from one mother through their children, or track the children through all their maternal line as well. And for males, it is that Y chromosome and the mutation from one generation to the next, and any small changes there that we have. But what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at a couple of the different like forms of evolution, propositions in terms of where human life started. So one of them is the out of Africa theory. And what this is saying basically is that human life originated in Africa, and then as that life has moved through Earth, it's replaced populations that used to live in that area. So different versions that could be classified as humans were then replaced by the humans that came from Africa. And the evidence that they have to support this is mitochondrial DNA and the very few different forms of mitochondrial DNA that are being found, and that those 4 different types of mitochondrial DNA have been found in Africa. But also the Y chromosome DNA changes that we were talking about before, the chromosomal changes that have been found in Asian men show slight mutations from men that were found in Africa, which are proposing that it started in Africa, then moved to Asia, and during that time small mutations changed, and you can track those gradual changes from one generation to the next. So the out of Africa theory can also be referred to as the Eve theory, mostly because it is that mitochondrial female DNA that's providing the bigger form of evidence to support this theory. The other theory, the other hypothesis that we're working with here is this multi-regional hypothesis, which says that early human life began in lots of different areas around the same time. So Africa, Europe, Southeast Asia, and that they weren't distinct species, so to speak. So instead of replacing, like the out of Africa theory has, the multi-regional theory suggests that DNA and genes were able to be shared between these different versions of humans. So when Africans encountered Europeans, that they were able to interbreed with each other and share their DNA. So rather than replacing, there's this interbreeding that could happen there as well. And that's a part of the multi-regional hypothesis. What we have here is a lovely little chart that shows the kind of like the family tree of human life. At the top here, the most recent forms that we have are the Homo sapiens and the Homo neanderthalis. And as you can see, it tracks down here and then through here and then down here as well. So we've got the Australopithecus africanus that we spoke about before, and there's a whole range of different branches, such as on the right hand side here, where the branch stops. So there's no evidence to suggest that there was similar life from that after those ones have been found. So we're talking about that idea of speciation and then species dying out or becoming extinct or changing so much that the interbreeding is no longer possible. So this is just a little chart. I do recommend that you have an idea of which versions of humans are the most recent and which version of humans are the most ancestral in terms of the millions of years ago that they were found. Just so in terms of you reading questions, you've got an idea around time frame, who existed when, who existed at roughly the same time, in case you're reading diagrams and you find them confusing, okay? So this is a very similar picture to what we were just looking at, but instead of it being a tree, what we're really looking at here is the year bracket in which those species existed. So the green ones here are our pre-human primates. Orange and below, they're all our different versions of humans. All of these walk on 2 feet. It's unsure in this period of time here whether they used fire. And then from this part here down and across, we're looking at the ability to use stone tools. You can see that the Homo erectus here lived for quite some time, and it lived during times that we have evidence of other forms of human life existing as well. So we have the Agasta, the Homo ancestor, Neanderthalis, all existing at the same time as the Homo erectus, and that can look. There's different things that are happening here. You can look at evidence of if there was any interbreeding being able to happen between these homos because they are of the same species. They are like versions of Homo sapiens. So there is that potential that could have occurred there. But what we're really just looking at here is how long they were around for. And when we talk about Denisovans in a minute, you're going to be looking at evidence that's been found in Homo sapiens to suggest interbreeding has been occurring and those types of things as well. So we'll get to that in a minute. So the big trends that you need to keep in mind for human evolution. One is our increase in our brain size. So as we've gone through the different versions of humans, our brains have gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. Our faces have become more squashed and flat, and our noses stick out a lot more than what they used to. Our jaw has shrunk, and our teeth are also significantly smaller than what they used to be as well. And over time, we've had this ability to create tools. So think of tools in terms of, yes, you know, your hammer and nail or your spears, but also think of it in terms of technology and that cultural evolution. So our brain size and all these changes have really enabled us to culturally evolve who we are as humans. A former version of humans, we're going to basically be looking at all the different versions of humans for a little bit here. Australopithecus as a genus is 3.7 million years ago that these guys were found. That's when they were living. All the members of Australopithecus are extinct, so there are no current in existence Australopithecus. So what we're getting in terms of evidence here is that fossil evidence that we were talking about before. But there have been no fossils of Australopithecus that have been found out of Africa, which also supports the out of Africa theory. Some features of the Australopithecus as a genus are that they were bipedal like us. Their brain size ranges from 400 to 500 mils. They have large molars, which are the teeth towards the back of your mouth. And they have a rounded top part to their skull where apes and things tend to have this big crest at the top where the bone comes together because it can be a little bit scary and help to scare off their predators and all that type of stuff. And there are two big groups that are recognized here. It's the Robustus and the Gracilis. From the Australopithecus that we were talking about before, we get into the Homo habilis. This is 2.4 million years ago, and over their existence, we can see a real decrease in the teeth size, but an increase in brain size. Brow ridge, which is the bones for your eyebrow, are really decreasing in their size as well. And the brain size that we were talking about just before, we're getting it to about 640 mil, so a little bit bigger. There is evidence of tool use with these guys as well. So it's real basic stone tools that they were using. And the fossils show great variability, and that there is a couple of different species here. So the habilis and the rudolphinus I'm not very good at saying that word. And again, no fossils found outside of Africa. So these are the tools that we were just talking about, those old R1 tools. So they're stone tools with that sharp point for things like spears, cutting food, and all of those types of things as well. Homo erectus is next. These are 1.8 million years old. That's how long ago they were around, and fossils of these guys have been found outside of Africa. So it is proposed that Homo erectus are the subspecies of humans that made that bridge from Africa into other areas of the world. There is evidence of stone tools, but there's also evidence of fire, so the potential of them starting to cook their food. So that takes intelligence, forethought, planning, being able to keep your food, knowledge that cooking food is able to kill diseases, so you're able to stay healthier, and all of that type of stuff there too. There is a decrease in jaw size, so teeth size therefore also decreases. This nose becomes really external instead of it just being those holes on the face. The arms are much shorter because we're looking at them being more strongly bipedal, so using the hands to start fires, using the hands to carry things from one location to the next as they move around, rather than swinging from tree to trees more often, those types of things. So there are a few different variants. We've got Java man and Peking man, but we do have evidence that they did emigrate out of Africa. We then get the Homo heidelbergensis, which is 0.4 million years ago. Their brain size is quite large, 1,200 milliliters, and they were able to use complex tools very similar to the Homo erectus. So think the fire, being able to cut up food, spearing prey, all that type of stuff. These guys were quite tall. 1.8 is the average, which is about 6 foot for those of you playing along at home. They were a lot more muscular than modern humans as well, and that's probably something to do with the types of prey and predators in which they were trying to escape, the foods in which they ate, and how they got those foods as well. So that need for strength to be able to beat and to capture their food. There's also evidence with these guys in terms of red ochre paint. So where they are finding fossils of these guys, they're also finding evidence of artwork. And some people believe that these guys are the first ones in terms of burying their dead. So that idea of showing respect to elders, but also keeping themselves safe and not having diseases that those people could have died from or could be infecting their bodies near where they're living as well. The next one that we have is the Denisova hominin, so Denisovans. Now this is very recent, and this is where we really start to challenge some of the ideas that we've already thought of. So in about 2010, they found some fragments. They found a knuckle bone and they found 2 teeth inside this Denisova cave, which is in Siberia, and they found evidence of that Neanderthals lived there, but also that modern humans lived there. The 2 teeth belong to different members of the same population. So they know that they were about the same time, and they also know that they're not from the same individual. So the evidence that they found from them makes them 2 very distinct individuals. And a tooth fossil, which still had DNA, was found there as well. So they've been able to run a sequence on that DNA. And what they've been able to find through analyzing the mitochondrial DNA is that it's distinct from Neanderthals, but it's also humans. So they're looking at the genome of it and they're studying it, and there's this evidence to suggest that there was interbreeding between modern humans and Neanderthals, and that's where we get the Denisovans from. There is an article in our lesson plan for you to have a little bit of a read through. Every year there's more and more new evidence about these Denisovans and the potential for this interbreeding, and evidence of how these things have been able to happen. So that potentially that change from Neanderthalis to Homo sapien could have been happening, and that's what the Denisovan is, that bridging gap between those 2 species. But there's also evidence to suggest about 3 to 5% of DNA in Melanesians, so Malaysian people, and Aboriginal Australians also aligns with Denisovans. So that movement through Asia towards Australia, and before we're looking at Australia breaking off from Asia, that is when the ancestral Aboriginals would have come to Australia, and potentially they have a higher percentage of Denisovan DNA compared to non-Indigenous Australians. So Homo neanderthalis, 0.4 to 35,000 years ago. Again, a large brain capacity, 1,200 milliliters, and their fossils show that they've lived in a lot of different areas, that they made tools that were a lot finer than their predecessors, that they did bury their young, they have burial sites, that they lived in caves for shelters, and there's also been found remnants of clothing. So as they've lost their hair to keep them warm and safe, they've crafted clothing to help them live in the different conditions that they've had. So that's a form, all of those are forms of cultural evolutions for humans over time. We have them being very strong, but a lot shorter than the modern humans. So that's where we're getting this, like, oh, we started off really short, then we got, really tall, then we've gotten shorter, and now we're gradually getting taller again. And it's overlapped in time with Homo sapiens. So there is evidence to suggest that the Neanderthalis and Homo sapiens existed at the same time, but there is no mitochondrial evidence to suggest the interbreeding between the two, and the evidence that we would have to be that their mitochondrial DNA is the same as what's found in our female DNA. So there's this little bit of difference that's being found there. So we can't say that interbreeding has occurred between Neanderthalis and Homo sapiens just yet, but maybe in the future they'll actually find evidence for that. What we've got here is the Homo neanderthalis' bones. You can see the flatter brow ridge compared to apes, but slightly larger than ours. The single bone for the jaw, and this flatter nose that we have here as well to create that more prominent shape that is more common in us. Look at the length of the arms compared to ours. Our arms really won't reach our knees because they're just, it's this idea of us being able to reach for things and do things, and we need our arms to be relatively short to be able to do that successfully. If our arms are very long, then they can kind of get in the way and create some issues. But if they're longer, then it does suggest that potentially they were swapping to being quadrupedal from time to time. And you can see here with this pelvis shape that you get this V shape here, which helps in terms of delivering young and those types of things, but also it's quite wide and not as long as other pelvises that we were looking at in terms of primates and things like that in the other pictures. We are Homo sapiens, and there is evidence to suggest that versions of Homo sapiens have existed for 130,000 years. The earliest one is Cro-Magnon man, and that's probably the one that's 130,000 years old. Our brain size on average is 1,350 milliliters. Sorry, I'm going a bit number dyslexic today. 1,350 mil, which is the largest one that we've read so far. So our brain size in there is quite large. We really have a big reduction in features. You can hardly see any brow ridge at all there. You can see this flat face compared to what we've had in those previous ones. We are very skillful tool makers, and that includes technology. So your phone, your laptop, whatever you're watching this on, how you communicate with other people, all of that is evidence of how skillful we are. There's this, we get more cultural artifacts as well. So cave painting ceremonies, the use of fire as a part of culture and tradition, farming for plants and for animals, the language that we have developed, so English versus all these other different ones, so Latin, Thai, every language that's existed comes from Homo sapiens. So we've developed this ability to communicate between different countries. It's every single thing that really makes us who we are is because of that larger brain size. Think religion and cultural changes because of religion, the belief systems that we have and how they change over time. All of that is because of our brain size and that cultural evolution of Homo sapiens. Two important developments of the genus Homo over time is that bipedal locomotion, so always walking on two legs, so freeing up our hands to carry things, being able to make tools, and increasing in our control over the environment. So that farming, the idea that we clear spaces to build homes rather than living in caves, all of that kind of stuff. Our increase in brain size is the other big one here too. So that greater capacity to be able to problem solve and pass on cultural behaviors rather than them always being innate, so things that are born with us. It's this ability to develop skills over time and teach those things to other people that make the genus Homo unique. So we're going to dive into cultural evolution a little bit more here. It's stories, beliefs, language, symbols, all of those things that start from a very early human society. And it's things that we follow through with even today. It involves a transfer of non-genetic information from one individual to another. So education, learning, all those types of things, that is part of cultural evolution. It is very, very fast. So even in my lifetime, mobile phones didn't exist when I was born, laptops didn't exist when I was born, the internet really only just came into existence, but there was no such thing as Wi-Fi. Everything had to be wired in. In my lifetime, all of those things have changed and will continue to change, and it's exciting to see what the world will be like in the future. But what we're really looking at here is skills that we're able to develop over time, things that we can learn from other people rather than things that are innate. And what innate is its behaviors and characteristics that you are born with, that you don't need to learn from others. So think the baby duck following the mother duck, that's innate. That duck just does that. It doesn't know that it needs to do that. There are very few innate behaviors in humans. One of them is breastfeeding. So a baby just knows the position to put its mouth in to be able to breastfeed successfully, and the ability of babies to grab hold. So if you put a finger or something in their palm, they will be able to grab a hold of whatever is in there, and that's innate from when we were moving around a lot and they had to grab onto clothing or grab onto their mother so that they were carried around safely. So very few innate behaviors still exist in humans. It's these small gradual changes that creates cultural evolution, and religion is a big one for that. So we've got lots of different types of religion, and they tend to change over time as well, and their beliefs will change ever so slightly and gradually over time, and that's a form of cultural evolution. It doesn't always have to be big things happening fast. It can be quite slow and gradual, but religion creates tradition. And traditions are a form of cultural evolution. So how we bury our young, how we respect our young, all those types of things indicate cultural evolution. How we bury the dead, all of that. Do we set them on fire like the Vikings? Do we bury them in the ground? What's within our culture that tells us how to respect these people? And really, we're looking at technological developments being more recent cultural forms of evolution, where there are a lot more older ones as well. So the making of clothing, all that type of stuff, that's all forms of cultural evolution. Technological evolution, this is really us having control over our environment and applying what we know to the world around us. So what we really have done is we've gone from being able to use stone tools to kill prey that we're needing to eat, to being able to make computers that are faster than the human brain in terms of how they work. Making things that are so small yet so powerful. Think about your phone is basically a computer, and computers started off being the size of our classroom. They were that big, and now you can hold them in the palm of your hand. That's technological evolution. Even the fact that we are able to go to space, that is fantastic evolution. That is big change that has happened over the course of human life, over that 100,000 years. So our biology, culture, technology, they are all connected to each other. We used to be hunters and gatherers, and now we are farmers, and we've still got that little bit of a lifestyle to us, but we go to Coles instead of going out and hunting our food. It's a little bit different. We don't so much live the nomadic lifestyle that we used to live, where we'd go from one place to the other and we'd move to be finding our foods and those types of things. We've developed more cooperative skills. being able to work together and the division of labors. So the fact that all people have different types of jobs, whether it is that you're a teacher or you work at Coles or you're building technology for other people to be using, we've divided those jobs in that labor between different people so that we're all sharing in the work and reaping the rewards of other people as well. The domestication of animals and plants so that we can create opportunities for other people so that it doesn't take as long to get all of that stuff, all those agricultural needs. The increasing use of technology so we can share knowledge around the world without it taking so long, without it only being word of mouth. I can put something up on Instagram and you guys would see it instantly if you chose to do that. I like this, the fact that I can make this as a video rather than and I can Google and find all the answers and link all those different things to you, rather than relying on one person to tell someone else and continual word of mouth, because as you guys would know, word of mouth tends to change the information that's passed along, but we can have more accurate records of that, and it's so much easier for it to get from one person to the next as well. Technology and culture, because of our bipedalism, so the ability for us to carry things and work on things and problem solve, that's all forms of cultural evolution. And basically, that's it. This is the end of the topic. This is the end of all the work. Please make sure that you've got notes for each one of the 4 different sections to this study design, because you will need to have knowledge on each section of this for your upcoming SAC, which will be in the last week of this term. And you need to make sure that you are prepared to discuss all of these things. Think about the convergent and divergent evolution, the evidence that we have of cultural evolution, how we know that things are related, different testing that we can do. So think about your DNA hybrid testing and all those types of things as well. You need to make sure that you know about all of that so that you can get the best possible grade on your last ever biology SAC. Good luck, everyone.